Hello, my name is Christine Denaro. Yes, of course. How's this? My name is Christine Denaro, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Warners Pond Task Force, and my representation is downstream of Butter. Thank you all for coming tonight to provide feedback on our alternatives for consideration for the future of Warners Pond. Our task force consists of a diverse group of people with their own ideas, opinions, facts, points of view, and perspectives. We have managed to come together and in some cases agree to disagree. 3 alternatives will be presented tonight. They do not have to be mutually exclusive. No decisions will be made tonight. We use the community criteria from Envision Concord Bridge to 2030 comprehensive long-range plan to guide our alternatives. I have a poster in the front so that you can take a look at what they are more specifically. All these criteria are important, not just one. So think systems, not silos. They include history and character, livability, values, recreation, mobility, accessibility, ecological sustainability, and fiscal sustainability. The point of this evening is to provide a forum for constructive feedback. We plan to be disciplined with our timing to allow as many people as possible to voice their questions or comments tonight. Each presentation will be 10 minutes. Q&A after each presentation will be 15 minutes. We ask that you focus your questions and comments on the specific presentation. Speakers will have 2 minutes. We will be using signs with 30 seconds and stop. After all 3 presentations, we will open the Q&A for any questions or comments. We want to prioritize comments from Concord residents to ensure that their voices are heard. If you don't have a chance to share at the microphone, please put your comments or questions on a sticky note and post it on the wall during the open house portion of the meeting. And there's posters up around the room for each presentation. If someone has already voiced your question or comment, we ask that you not repeat it, but ask or state something new. Your feedback will help us form our final recommendation, which we will present to the Natural Resources Commission. So our next steps is the task force will meet approximately 3 more times. We will review your questions, comments, and the proposals. Our goal is to agree on a proposal that we can all live with. And if a task force member or members cannot live with the particular proposal, then it will be noted. I will now turn it over to Bill to finish our introduction.
So I'm Bill Cremeza, and I represent the Natural Resources Commission on the task force. I'm from Davis Court, right around the corner here in Concord Center. As many of you know, the full document from which we are speaking tonight is 59 pages long, so good reading, and it's available on our website if you haven't looked at it yet. So tonight we're presenting summaries of these 3 proposals. And as Chris has said, we are absolutely seeking your comments and questions. That's what we want to hear. Before we deliberate and present our final recommendation to the Natural Resources Commission. About the 3 proposals, as Chris had mentioned, each was designed by a subgroup of task force members. I want you to know that we specifically had divergent opinions in each subgroup. In other words, on the dam removal group, we had people who preferred dredging, and that was true in the other groups as well. We did this because we wanted to attempt to arrive at a consensus, putting forth the best possible proposal that the entire task force could live with when we put it into this document. And each group, I have to say, worked diligently to be factual. But you will see, even having done that, there's differences. You will find at least 3 areas. I think of costs, I think of benefits to wildlife, and recreation, where these proposals do differ. And they differ, again, because you have different assumptions about the facts. You have different interpretation of facts, and therefore different conclusions. Now, let me mention something about those three, and then we can move on. The costs. All three show estimates that we think do show the overall picture, but individual line items can and have been challenged even by members of our own task force. The benefits to wildlife. All three proposals claim that wildlife in the pond, the restored wetland system, will benefit. And to a great extent, this is true, but given the diverging criteria of what constitutes a benefit. Thus, each presents a different perspective on wildlife, and that has been, and some of those have been challenged by our task force members as well. And finally, recreation. All three of the task force proposals include elements intended to improve access to recreational activities, but with different emphasis on the types or the intensity of those activities. Now, and they also have been challenged by our task force. As a task force, we have come to respect these divergent perspectives and the folks who hold them. We know that the hardest work is still in front of us, to choose what we believe will be the greater good. And we will do that when it comes time to make that final recommendation sometime over the next couple of months. Meanwhile, we turn to you to hold up tonight, to look at and review the summaries in a way that may give us even a greater insight as we move to our final deliberations. So with that, I'll now turn this over to our facilitator, Toby Berkman, who will get things started. Toby?
Yeah, thanks so much, Bill and Chris, for that great introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Toby Berkman. I work at a nonprofit organization called CBI, and I've had a real privilege here to support the task force in the great work they've been doing, the hugely difficult work and time-intensive work that they've all put in. So we're very excited today to be able to come to you with these three different alternative proposals to share them with you and get your invaluable feedback on them. So I just want to clarify a couple of things about what's going to happen today and what's going to happen moving forward. So we're going to hear from these three groups. We're going to have a little bit of a Q&A after each of them, as Chris mentioned. We're going to have an open house where everyone can put additional questions and comments up on sticky notes around there, and we will capture all of that. We also have an online portal where if you forgot something today and you want to share something else after the fact, you can go onto our website, click the link, and leave additional comments. We need and we welcome every perspective, every question, every comment. After today, we're going to get together and we're going to compile all the input that we heard today, that we see on the sticky notes, that we see in our online portal, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to adjust it. What did we hear? What does that suggest for us about what we need to work more on? What directions we might want to think about? Are there things we haven't thought of? From there, we're going to assess these alternatives that we've come up with against the criteria, the shared criteria that we're going to share with you in just a minute that we've developed and agreed to as a group. We're going to compare them. How well do they do on these different criteria? And from there, we're going to see where do we agree, where do we not agree, is there a pathway forward that we can try to build consensus? And it may not be any one of these alternatives on its own. It might be some combination of different elements of what you're going to hear today. From there, we're going to develop our recommendations, and we're going to be clear where we agree and where we don't, right? Where there's consensus and where there's not, and that's going to be submitted to the NRC for their consideration. So that's what's happening today. That's what's happening moving forward. I do just want to give a little bit of context for folks who may be less familiar with what's happened, how this task force was formed. So I'm going to give a quick 2-minute history lesson. In Warner's Pond, there's been eutrophication over time. Right? What does that mean? That means that sediments have come in, the depth of the pond has decreased, there's an increase in invasive plants, and there's been impaired recreation. So the town over the years has been doing a number of measures to try to address that. In 2008, there was a restoration of the dam. In 2012, there was a watershed management plan, followed by a dredging feasibility study in 2018. And then in 2020 and 2021, at town meeting, there was an approval for $2.5 million for dredging. And following that, an additional $550,000 was approved in 2023 for restoration. While that was going on in 2022, there was a dredging project bid that came in for over $9 million. And at that point, the town took a step back and reassessed and did an alternatives analysis study. that was released in 2023. The results of that study caused some community concerns. And as a result of that and other factors, and a decision that it would be helpful to bring diverse stakeholders together to think about a pathway forward, the Warners Pond Task Force was formed. And that's these individuals up here. So you can all, this is all our task force members who are here today. We have at least one online as well. The purpose of the task force, as articulated in our mandate, we were appointed by the Natural Resource Commission. We're supposed to become familiar with all the alternatives that have been considered to date and explore new ideas as appropriate. So that's a lot of what you're going to hear today. And then from there, we're supposed to recommend a course of action that reflects the community criteria identified in Envision Concord, which we heard Chris talk about just a minute ago. So what have we done in terms of the nuts and bolts of our work? We've had 18 task force meetings since February 2024. We had a community meeting in June 2024 where we teed up what work we're going to be doing. We developed that shared evaluation criteria, not just the 5 basic things that Chris mentioned, but actually 24 sub-criteria that relate to each of those 5 criteria as we think they apply to Warners Pond. We reviewed and discussed voluminous reports and documentation that have been written over the years about the pond, and we consulted various experts on different elements of what the pathway forward could look like. As Bill and Chris mentioned, we had work groups go into separate teams to develop these proposals with varying perspectives, and that's what we're going to share with you today. So we also want to just reiterate the full proposal is available on our task force website. It describes all these pieces you're going to hear today in a lot more detail. These are our community criteria. I'm not going to repeat them. They're on the board over here. You've heard them from Chris, but there are 24 additional sub-criteria within these categories, as I mentioned. Okay, so I am now going to invite up our first speaker, Mark Howell, who's going to speak to us on the proposal from the Recurring Pond Management Subgroup. Mark's going to speak for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to, as we mentioned, have some Q&A, and you can see some guidelines up there on how that's going to work. I'll reiterate those when we get there. We just want to note, we may not have time for all of your questions. We expect that's going to be the case, but we also have this open house and the opportunity for sticky notes because everyone's perspective here really matters, and we want to hear it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark to share with us his presentation.
Thank you, Toby. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, and forward is
This right button right there.
right button. Great. The recurring management proposal recognizes that changes in the pond are occurring gradually. Oh, you want to actually have me? You got me twice. Okay. That's not confusing. Okay. The recurring management proposal recognizes that changes to the pond are occurring gradually. There is no imminent threat. However, without intervention, the value of this resource to the community is declining over time. The root of this proposal is an attempt to address the decline without major capital investments through a more systematic pond management techniques. The proposal calls for management of the pond and the surrounding areas through engagement and collaboration between town departments of natural resources, recreation, and public works, and the community stakeholders such as the Friends of Warners Pond and the Scouts, along with others. The goal of the management plan would be to monitor the pond system and experiment with methods to reduce invasive vegetation, enhance environment for wildlife, enhance the recreational potential for the community, create opportunities for wider community involvement with the pond, and enhance the sustainability in the face of climate change. The key elements of the proposal take advantage of the time that we have to accommodate changing conditions surrounding the pond. It implicitly acknowledges that the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, Giroux Park, and the changes at MCI Concord already are impacting the community views on the pond. If the goals or priorities of the community change, the management plan can reflect those elements. The proposal requires that the town develop an active management plan that monitors the pond conditions and attempts to address them over time with operations and maintenance activities. This means that a set of measurements which gauge the progress or the lack thereof will be created and monitored. Engagement with community partners is also key. The NRC is charged with convening a meeting of community stakeholders at least twice a year under this plan to provide input and report progress. The proposal recognizes that the opportunity to make capital improvements would still be there if in the future, should these efforts not result in a stable system that's meeting community needs. So what are the benefits? The benefits of this approach can be summed up in two simple statements. The proposal aims to keep things largely as they are, with no major changes to the pond proposed. The proposal also costs less. The management plan spending is incremental to money that is already being spent on dam inspections, mowing, and the like. In addition to these benefits, by reinvigorating the stewardship of the pond through a formal management program with goals, reporting, and systematic attention, that should enable the pond and the adjacent recreation areas to evolve in conjunction with the neighborhood and West Concord. In particular, it allows coordination with the MCI redevelopment planning and visioning before committing to a major capital project. The third slide here, and this is the first time you've seen a slide similar to this, so I'm going to step aside here and mention that you're going to see a slide in this format which is designed to be consistent across the proposals. We're trying to make it fairly easy to compare the costs as we understand them. So I'll walk through the 4 lines. Base Plan A, this is the crux of the management plan. It supports the cost for a pond consultant to advise and help implement an operations and management plan. Included in the capital outlay line is $50,000 for improvements to the boat launch and $20,000 for permits and analysis for vegetation and treatment programs, among a few other small items. The Scenario B line adds expenses related to the dam maintenance and repairs that were identified in a 2023 inspection and analysis report by the Park Corporation. These should be thought of as expected costs to keep the dam functioning as designed. Scenario C is an estimated cost for a fish passage. A fish passage is an option that addresses fish migration should a long-term decision to keep the dam in place be made. This is only effective once downstream dams have been addressed that are already preventing migratory fish from reaching Concord. So it should be seen here as for information purposes only. Scenario D, drawdown. Drawdown is a method of controlling aquatic vegetation by seasonally lowering the water level in the pond. Engineers we have consulted state that the existing controls on the dam are too small in terms of water flow to enable effective drawdown. Some communities have installed pumping infrastructure to enable drawdown. Scenario D shows the costs associated with one such project at Bear Hill Pond in Harvard, again for illustrative purposes. Excluding the last 2 lines, the Scenario D, C and D, I would note that the combined Scenario A and B 5-year total cost is between $600,000 and $700,000. Some of that cost is already in existing town budgets. And finally, the risks and uncertainties associated with the management plan proposal. Warner's Pond is a complex system, and predicting the rate of change is difficult. We don't want to create a false sense of optimism. We could attempt to manage the pond and find out that the techniques available to us are not sufficient. Clearly, they have not been in the past, and so, however, intense focus with measurements and planning may yield better results. This proposal is an outline for trying that path. Attempting this approach first has the additional potential benefit of creating better data, which could help answer the difficult question of how much time does the pond have, which has come up numerous times through the task force's work and still remains unanswered. With that, we'll welcome questions.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Yep.
So I'm just going to say a little bit about the Q&A and how we want this to work. So we're going to have two different methods for submitting questions. Okay, for those of you who are in the room, if you'd like to ask a question of the task force, we invite you to go stand behind the microphone there, where I see we have a gentleman, Miguel, waiting. We have a couple of ground rules we want to suggest, right? To please be respectful, please avoid personal attacks. Please try to stick to the topics in the agenda. So we're really welcoming questions or comments now on this recurring management proposal. And we ask that you please be brief. We have our timekeepers up there with their signs indicating how much time is left. So that's for those of you who would like to ask a question or make a comment here in the room. And I'll just say we have task force members here who are ready to answer questions to the extent we can. If we cannot address a question, right, we will take note of it. We will try our best to address it moving forward in our final report or otherwise. For questions that might relate to engineering work that EA has done, we have them available online if needed to chime in and answer specific engineering questions, technical questions related to their work. And in addition, if we can't get your question here, again, you can use the comment cards or go online. For those of you who are joining online, if you would like to submit a question, there is a Q&A button in your Zoom toolbar, and you can see on the slide there what that looks like. It looks like a little call-out box with a question mark in it. If you click that, you can submit your question, and we're going to pause and have every few questions in the room and have Bert read those out loud. Okay, Bert's one of the members of the task force from the town. So that's how it's going to work. I will also just note, if you submit a comment online, our priority is going to be towards questions, because we have the task force here to interact with you. But please note, even if your comment is not read out loud, if you submit it online, we are taking note, and we're going to collect those, and all those will be shared and reported and considered by the task force. Okay, so with that, anyone who'd like to ask a question or make a comment, you can please approach the microphone. I'll invite our first questioner to proceed. So please introduce yourself, tell us where you live.
Yes, Miguel Echevarri, homeowner at 255 Commonwealth Ave. Mark, it's a quick one. The cost estimates, to confirm, can that be paid, a lot of it, out of the CPA funds?
It depends on what line you're talking about. So I'm just going to back up to that. The base plan A for new management plan is mostly operating costs. The expenses, for example, related to improvements of the boat launch could potentially be considered recreational improvements, but I would say that primarily those costs are operating costs. The dam maintenance and repair, again, those are work that needs to be done to the dam to keep the dam in functional shape. The third and fourth, the fish passage and the drawdown apparatus, would clearly be capital investments, primarily, and it's reflected there.
Wait, and they're funded how, the capital investments?
Well, that would remain to be seen, but
Okay,
yeah.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Let's take another one in the room. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yep. Sarah Grimwood, 520 Lexington Road. I don't know much about drawdown, and I'd be really interested in understanding a bit more about that. The document that you published says that Bear Hill Pond in Harvard has had some success. How does that pond compare to Warner's Pond? And also, if 3 feet of drawdown is typical, would 6 inches actually do much?
You want to do that? Yeah.
We chose Bear Hill Pond partly because they're so well organized around their pond and have similar milfoil and other invasives, but it's a much larger pond. It's a great pond of Massachusetts. On the other hand, it has been trying things. It has an active pond management team to do it. We would have to draw down much more than 6 inches. Absolutely. We'd have to get down somewhere probably in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 feet, maybe 3 feet or more. And in order to do that, we'd have to put in, like Bear Hill Pond has done, some kind of a pumping mechanism, because for whatever reason, the sluice gate that was put in there is not large enough to draw that much water off. You also have to do it over a number of years. You can't claim success after 1 year. It takes, from what I hear from Bear Hill Pond, and I've talked to them frequently, 3, 5, 6 years before you see the results. And it's not universal throughout the pond. But it is something that's been relatively successful. It's not the only thing that they use there. They're also using diver-assisted suction of the same kind of plants that we have. So, but that's the one we're eyeing the most.
Thanks.
Just briefly, the drawdown process essentially is letting water out of the pond to a level where the aquatic plants that are problematic are exposed to dry land in the winter and freeze. And then they're refilled. And the concern is that the structures on this pond don't restrict the flow enough to expect that the pond would go down and stay down in the wintertime long enough for this freezing to occur. The other thing that we have a concern about with drawdown is that in the face of the changing winters here, you don't get the periods of freezing that you may traditionally have had a few decades ago anymore, and so that also makes that a somewhat less reliable process.
Let's take one more in the room, then I'm going to check in with you, Bert, about if there's anything online. Go ahead, sir, please.
Hi, excuse me, Phil Brewer, 132 Wright Road. We back onto Warner's Pond. I commend the task force for coming up with this because I think it may be a great solution between the other two. Going a little deeper on the drawdown, I'm wondering how much this was studied, particularly in comparison to the pond in, I guess it's Harvard. Do they skate on the pond as much as we skate on our pond? And how quickly does it take to recover the pond to levels that can be enjoyed for swimming in the summer? So hopefully this has already been done, but I think if it hasn't been done, we need to go much deeper on this because the wintertime recreation for Warners is very important to accomplish all of these goals. So be curious to hear.
Well, to answer your question about skating, they do. In fact, I was skating on Bear Hill Pond this winter. So they do skating, et cetera. There will be a limited opportunity. They start now I've forgotten. They start drawing down in the late fall, I think maybe even November, and they start refilling, I think as early as March or late February. They begin to refill the pond. And it's varied from year to year how much. They have spent a lot of time studying the effect on wildlife, which is something we have not really, we have to gear up to do that. They have a lot of volunteers in town who do that for them. I know we have a lot of people in town who have that kind of background who might be able to do it for us too at the pond if we decide to go that route.
And if Warner's was drawn down by 2 or 3 feet, what's left to skate on?
Don't know. I don't know where. I don't know. It's, it has those shallow areas. Maybe it ends, now I'm being facetious, but maybe it becomes more, I don't know, more like.
I would think there'd be a way to.
There would be,
figure that out.
yeah, there would be. The deep hole would certainly be still a deep hole, that's for sure. In that sense, almost like Macomb Pond, but I don't know how big it would be.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's check in with Bert. Are there any questions online? Great, go ahead. Why don't you read them both and we can answer them in a chat.
So our first question is from Anna Feldwig. Will the town be applying to reclassify the dam as a low hazard as recommended by PAR? This would save the town money by requiring inspection every 10 years instead of every 5 years.
I think the simple answer is that certainly could be part of the management plan to reduce the operating costs.
Our next question comes from Ed Titteman, 656 Barretts Mill Road. When are the downstream dams being removed? Am I correct that there is no value in building fish ladder until the downstream dams are removed?
Yeah,
Right.
right. I'm not aware of any
As far as I
specific
know, there's
dates
no
for that.
point in removing it unless. All right, yeah.
Yeah, there'll be more on that in the dam removal team.
Let's keep going from the room here. Sir, please go ahead.
Peter Alden, Riverside Ave in West Concord. I saw one on your slide up there, hand removal of these underwater invasives. These underwater invasives, the milfoil, the fanwort, excuse me, Boston accent, and some of the others are all gunky, slimy, slime ball things. And if you get 99.9% of it out, but there's still some fragments left, boom, it's back up there again. How do you hand pull all this slimy gunk?
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about slimy gum. It would be a challenge, no question, Peter. What they're doing at Bear Hill is, and again, this is controversial too. They're using diver-assisted suctioning to get rid of that most of those types of plants, which we have to see how much we could afford to do if we decided to use that version. We were thinking also about what we'd have done traditionally out there, which is to remove the water chestnuts by hand pulling at the right certain time of the year, and then maybe even some of the water lilies. But it was certainly not to be able to pull the other stuff by hand. That's true.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Michelle Tao, 111 Losbrook Road. Having been involved with this for 40 years, Enid? I'm very excited that finally Joanne Loyne's vision is coming to fruition, that people are going to care about this pond. Okay, off the soapbox. I love this new idea. I didn't like the alternatives that were presented last year. One question is, here you say that the maximum costs are like $2 million if you do everything, and we got $3 million for dredging. The first part of the question is, can that $3 million that we've already gotten for the dredging be applied to this alternative?
At the end of the day, that's a question for the Community Preservation Committee, because it would involve a reallocation of funds that were already allocated for a particular purpose.
So if we still have the $3 million for dredging, which has been allocated for specifically dredging, could we do both? Could we do the money for the dredging and this so that we have deeper water for when we do want to have the summer activities?
You're touching on something that Chris mentioned in her introduction, which is we've tried to differentiate the proposals across the task force in order to give you a sense of what would happen if we go, maximally in one direction or another. But I think as the task force does try to reconvene and come to a solution, it is possible to mix and match some of these solutions. The fish passage wound up here because it also turned up in the dredging proposal, and we thought that it made sense to present the idea once, and so that you have a point and not see it coming up multiple times, but they could be.
And my last comment or question about the fish passage, since the other dams are still in situ in the other towns, could we not have that cost until the other dams are down? Could we put that off for decades?
Yeah, the short answer is really, when you think about this proposal, the things that would need to be addressed immediately would be lines A and B on this chart.
Okay.
And lines C and D can be brought in or not brought in at any point later.
Thank you very much. Great presentation.
We have more in line? Great, please, sir, come on up.
Just one quick question on the drawdown. Alec Wyeth, I live on 42 Orchard Road. Is this a one-time drawdown so that you get it down to the level, or is it a cyclical drawdown? So the water level drops, then it rises, then it drops? So,
Yes,
okay.
and so Bear Hill Pond in Harvard has something like 15 or 20 years worth of
Data on this, and they generally do it every year. There have been some years, for whatever technical reasons, they weren't able to do it, and they saw an immediate return of a lot of the plants they were trying to get rid of. Not immediate, but it happened. So yeah, they do it every year.
Okay.
Yeah, so we would be doing it every year,
Yeah,
too.
so the water level is not going to remain low
No,
throughout
it
the year?
drops. You bring it back up and it's by the end of the spring.
Okay, great, thank you.
Think of it like trying to control the weeds in your lawn. It takes effort over time.
Bert, anything online? Great, go ahead.
Katrina Kellner asks, in this scenario, what recreational opportunities would be expected? Boating, swimming, fishing, walking, etc.
So the primary recreational opportunity that was addressed in this would be some improvement to the boat launch facilities. The current assessment is that the parking, the turnaround space, the access for canoe launching and kayak launching is insufficient. And so there's been some proposals to do that, and we thought we'd incorporate that. But again, the general overriding idea behind this plan is to try and enable us to keep on doing the things that have traditionally been done there. For example, the scout crossing over ceremony and those kinds of things. So we'd like to be able to make some improvements that would allow those things to be done a little bit more easily, but largely remaining intact. Any other questions?
Anna Feldwig asks, why couldn't we try the drawdown with the mechanisms we have already just to see how well it works? Have we ever actually tried it?
The short answer to that is no, it hasn't been tried to the best of our knowledge. The dam inspection report raised some concerns about the functionality of the various structures that control the dam today. So, but the hydrology report, in other words, the amount of water flowing through the system, suggests that unless we happen to hit it on a dry, cold winter, the pond might drop a foot or so and then would probably stabilize there even if the control structures were opened all the way.
Okay. Are there more questions? Yeah, great. Please, ma'am, go ahead. Yeah, well, this will be our last question, then we're going to move to the next presentation.
Hi, Linda Olson. I'm at 54 Lotsbrook Road. Somebody had made a point about the drawdowns, and I have a question concerning when the dam was refurbished, I don't know, 8, 10 years ago, wasn't there a drawdown for that in order for that work to be done? And was there any noticeable or documented effect of what happened when that occurred? As
So-
far as, you know,
There's probably
Plant
people
life.
here with a better memory than mine on this, but there was a coffer dam installed, which is a temporary dam structure that allowed the removal of the old dam and the creation of a new dam. I don't remember what the level of the pond was. My recollection is it wasn't significantly.
it's my understanding that the level of the dam did drop a bit in order, because there was a lot of flooding.
Yeah.
Right, so the cofferdam allowed the dam to be removed in a dry condition, but upstream of that cofferdam, where the majority of the pond is, there was
Okay.
not a change in that water elevation.
So the water levels were still the same?
Upstream of the
Upstream,
cofferdam,
okay.
right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for all the great questions and comments. Thank you, Mark. Well done. Yeah, please. We're now going to turn it over to Paul to lead us through the next presentation. So I can get you set up here. You want this?
No, it's okay. Thank you. Hi, good evening. I'm Paul Bohm. I'm presenting on the behalf of a hardworking dredging group. So our starting point, you'll remember that the original plan for dredging back in 2022 hit a significant snag. I'm sorry? I didn't hear your name. Paul Bohm. Hi. So the original dredging plan back in 2022 hit a significant snag, that being the high cost of that dredging, $9.2 million, which you mentioned before. So the team went back to the drawing board and asked the question, can a more feasible, more cost-effective plan be developed? Because of the availability of an alternate disposal site called the Northfield site, which I'm going to describe in a minute, I'll get back to that, the dredging group considered not only a base plan of 35,800 cubic yards, which was the original plan in 2022, but we considered that perhaps we had two other options, that we could do additional dredging, that it might be cost effective. And because the dredging material would all be dewatered and disposed at a newly identified location called the North Field. I'll talk about that again in a minute. So the rationale was pretty simple. The more open water we created by dredging, the more water would be free of invasives, the more recreational opportunities would be on the pond, the more sediment would be removed, and the more nutrients associated with that sediment would be removed as well. And the nutrients were causing a lot of the eutrophication. So there were three plans. You see them outlined here in sort of green and purple and red. And these are just very, very conceptual, courtesy of Keith Hannon's graphics. So the original plan is the outlined black area in the green. And then with the additional dredging, we felt we could expand into the purple area. And then with more dredging, have a greater area of the pond. And the different areas are, the original area was about, I think, 14%, and I think we felt we could get up to about 50% of the pond through these different options. Again, the more open water, the better. So Jeff Quick of the Department of Corrections was part of this team, came up with the idea of the North Field. The North Field is owned by the Department of Corrections, but it's not part of the MCI Concord planning. It's a field which is adjacent to the agricultural field. It's bordered here, you see, with Route 2, so it's quite adjacent to the pond. So that piece of land would be available for receiving dredge material that would be pumped over to that area and then dewatered and disposed of as well, using a technology called geotubes. So it would be, at least on paper, a very efficient way. It wouldn't require a lot of trucking of dredge material. That was one of the hiccups of the original plan. There was trucking into the farm area, very expensive disposal option. So that was the idea, and the idea also would be to increase the dredge depth from about 9 to 12 feet. The deeper we went, the more the more light penetration would be thwarted to thwart the invasive growth. This is a close-up of that North Field. We did a LIDAR analysis. LIDAR just basically looked at the topography of the site, and this is a close-up view. And the LIDAR analysis indicated that about 49,500 cubic yards could be accommodated in that field. You remove the topsoil to permit the proper elevations next to the prison cemetery and Route 2, could be about 49,000 cubic yards. And additional excavation, if it were clean, would be available to take it up to 50,000 cubic yards, 100,000 cubic yards. So it looked like a very promising disposal area, which was right adjacent to the pond. And of course, dredging is the reasonable option for all of these issues about thwarting eutrophication, greater open water space, the ecological benefits. The Commonwealth Avenue boat launch, as well as the proposed boat launch at Giroux, would be part of the recreational improvements here. And of course, the North Field would reduce the costs. The plan, if you missed it, the previous slide had this little area right adjacent to Scout Island. Some of the dredge material, about 4,400 cubic yards, would be used to create a wetland shelf to enhance that feature. So it all looked good on paper. And the other part, there'd be a fish passage, which I'll show you a picture of. There'd be an opportunity for that as well. And then, of course, there'd be an opportunity, as mentioned before, to reclassify the dam at lower hazard. So this is just a photo from NOAA of this step pool fishway, which I think is the fish ladder type opportunity, which identified for all these options. So this would be sort of a natural stepwise process going from the river up into the pond, which would still be intact. The dam would still be there. Okay, well, everything was good until we got cost estimates. So the cost estimates, we were very careful in sending out a request for information. This wasn't an RFP, but these were well-informed cost estimates. They had come from two different engineering companies, Sumco and Charter, and we really questioned every line item in these estimates and compared them with the previous estimates from the original bid. And you can see here that the cost of even the base dredging went from about $5 million to about $6 million. Now, these costs include the dredging, fish passage, and other operational costs, but the whole cost of this, you know, the good news is it's 30 to 50% lower than the original cost, but it's really still an expensive proposition. The good news is the benefits. This would keep the pond intact. It would open up a lot of open water. It would be a quasi-permanent solution because we wouldn't have to do anything year after year. This would probably be at least a multiple decade, if not a 100-year solution for the pond. But the risks and uncertainties with the first one, we presume that there'd be about a 100-year sediment refill estimate. Even if that's off by several decades, it's still a long-term solution. The sediments would have to be reanalyzed, and there might be re-permitting needed for this, especially if you went to a larger volume. And of course, the design is conceptual, and the cost estimates are really rough. But they are informed. What does that mean? That means it's not off by an order of magnitude. It may be off by 10, 20, 30%, but still those costs, are very, very eye-opening, I would say. There were several ideas that were not proposed. There was, in the alternatives analysis, which kind of kicked off the whole task force effort, EA put up a proposal of 14,000 cubic yards. The task force immediately realized that was really an insufficient restoration. That would open water up less than 10% of the pond. So perhaps that would be cost effective, but that would not be a solution of any permanence. There was also a proposal called the side channel, which essentially would route the Neshoba Brook through a side channel and then out over the dam without the sediment or the nutrients accumulating in the pond. We analyzed that. That was deemed unfeasible from an engineering point of view and from other points of view, which we can kind of talk about. So that's where we are right now. We have a good idea with a good disposal area, courtesy of the Department of Corrections. It's right adjacent to the pond. But the question is if and how we proceed with this. Thank you.
Okay, so same process as before, right? Those of you who are interested in asking a question, please line up at the microphone. Those of you joining online, you can submit questions through the Q&A button. Okay, same ground rules as last time. You can see them on your screen. Great, I see we have a gentleman, so please introduce yourself, ask your question.
Well, I appreciate you classifying me as a gentleman, thank you. And I appreciate the task force. You guys have obviously put a ton of work into this. I'm sure the assignment pays generously, but I appreciate your hard work. The original quote for dredging, I assume the numbers are comparable to what I just saw, and few things that I buy have gone down by 50 to 30% over the last 3 years. These alternative fields you cite have been there. How did we not, in the original evaluation of dredging, know that there was a more cost-effective approach? And I ask this because the confidence that the community has in the process is important. And it obviously draws questions about objectivity when you see something as obvious as what you just showed.
Perhaps Dealey can speak to that. I'm not sure the availability of that Northfield land was a fact or was even considered, but good question. Go ahead.
So when we originally spoke to the prison about the availability of a location, the site that they identified was what was put into the bid proposal. And this field was not identified as an option.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, to me, it just seems really obvious. I ride by it on my bike all the time to look right there. I don't know how that was missed, but thank you. I appreciate the perspective. Yeah. Thank you.
Sir, did you give your name? Just want to double check.
I thought I did. Okay. Called me a gentleman. I got flustered when he said I was a gentleman. Don Parker. I live at 43 Pond Street, not adjacent to the pond, but pretty close. Thank you.
Thanks. Sarah Grimwood, 520 Lexington Road. I would really appreciate just a bit. I just want to clarify the costing behind this, because in the report you talk about how the costs include all the various different pieces of improvement, not just the dredging, and you have an appendix where you've nicely laid out all the details. But for example, the first proposal we saw had various costs for dam maintenance. It seems very different in your proposal. So I'm just wondering how this all comes together. Has everything been included in the summary? And I know, you need to add contingencies and things will change over time, but just to help me understand how this all adds up.
So basically the answer to that is we received quotes from 2 different companies. We also included Fish Passage. We included all the PAR information on what the dam needs to be handled and taken care of every year. We took it from that report. We also included the boat launch area for ComAv, potentially also for over on Pond Street, and a potential for a boat launch area or access to water at Giroux Park. So if you look at the details of our report, it really details out all of those costs. And some of them are recurring and some are one-off costs.
So all those details in Appendix 3, I think it was, are added to the dredging for each of the different ones?
Yes.
So why is the costs in your appendix for the dam maintenance different from the first proposal we just saw?
For the what? I'm sorry.
Well, from the first sub-team that presented. Because that obviously has dam maintenance as well, because the dam's going to stay there in both cases. I'm obviously missing something.
I think it was just the way we had set it up.
Okay.
The amounts that we used for dam maintenance, for fish passages, and what was the third thing, were the same in all 3 cases. Now, why they, how it got charted there and generalized, I don't know. But I know those.
Just the way it's presented.
Yeah, it's the way it's presented. But those 3 are definitely the same.
Thank you.
Right.
In the final.
Ken Natalie, 54 Lawsbrook Road. I'm curious as to whether or not drawdown would facilitate dredging, since now you're dealing with lower volumes, more concentrated solutions or more concentrated material, and if a combo approach would be advisable to approach the problem. Thank you.
Are you suggesting if dredging that occurs after with the drawdown?
After drawdown. Drawdown, then you have a more concentrated, less volume to deal with. Has anyone ever looked at that? Or, I have no idea how you do the engineering for that, but...
It's a different dredging technology. Instead of having floating boats and hydraulic dredging, you'd actually have to have vehicles out there scooping it up. You just couldn't...
You have lower volumes, less material to dredge, so it considers the volume's lower, right?
Yeah. When we requested our cost estimates for dredging, it appears that they all came back with using geotubes, but we do know there are other ways to do it, and we certainly can look into that. But for the moment, we just got it based on using geotubes. But thank you.
I think I would just also clarify that the amount of dewatering that you would be able to do would not allow any equipment into the pond. You would still have too much water and muck so that you wouldn't be able to do a combined effort. The dredge that was originally proposed and what's being considered now has always been a hydraulic dredge, because you can't get the volume low enough in order to get equipment into the pond. There's just too much water and muck remaining.
Thank you. And go ahead, please.
Pam Rockwell, Main Street. So I have been a water quality monitoring sampler since the late 90s, and in the 90s when Acton was still had wastewater, had septic systems all along Neshoba Brook. I would walk in from the Commonwealth Ave site into the water in my waders. I often went swimming when I didn't intend to. I would step into sediments and it would bubble up hydrogen sulfide smelling stuff. And I would always pick that site to do last because I would rush home and basically water down my waders and take a shower to clean up. It was not swimmable then, and I know that Acton's done a lot of work to get those put those people on wastewater treatment plant instead of the septic, and I know that the conditions are different. Will any of these dredging options actually make the pond swimmable?
That is certainly an option. I mean, but it certainly might not be right away, and we have to have the water tested and all of that. But our goal initially is to clean out the invasives, clean out some of the muck so that it's much more manageable. And you're right. I think that the other towns have done more to stop the flow of all of that muck, so.
But it's still in the muck at this point.
It is,
so
it
it's
is.
Still a question is,
Sure.
I mean, I didn't intentionally go swimming.
Sure.
But other people do unintentionally go swimming as well, so.
Sure, but I think
the question would be for a dam removal too, whether there would ever be a chance that we're talking about swimmable water.
Right, I think it's
Well,
a question down the road.
Yeah, if I can just add to that. So right now the pond, it's a very shallow pond, as you know. So the circulation and the availability of oxygen is pretty limited to the sediments. By dredging the sediments and having more free water, you're going to get more oxygen. Will that eliminate all the H2S or no? Because naturally pond sediments do get anoxic, but I think it will greatly reduce it because you're going to add oxygen because you'll have more water flowing through the system, and you'll have deeper areas. And you know, it's the shallow areas with dead plants that decompose. That's what creates the H2S.
Mary Weinberg, Hillside Avenue. Regarding benefits, you don't have to answer this question. We have never talked about the benefits of the health effect, and I did a lot of research. My ex-husband, who's a doctor, wrote many articles, wrote an article on the effects of parks on the well-being of communities according to the Surgeon General. 3 pages of references to medical information. Our Concord Board of Health has a website called Concord Mass Community Health Improvement Plan 2025. They have just added Norm's article to that website, so I will repeat it again, Concord Community Health Improvement Plan 2025. It talks about all the reasons why we need blue space and the effects. So I hope you all read this paper, and I want to thank Melanie, who's the director of the health department, and Elisa, director of community development, to realizing the importance of this and putting it in our health, in the health board. And we have never included health in this. It's been the polywogs and all the things, but this is the first time, and tonight I want to introduce the importance of health. I have 30 seconds. I'll read the statement from our Department of Health. The mission of the Concord Health Division is to assess and address the needs of the Concord community in order to protect and improve the health and quality. They felt that this issue, the blue pond, the blue space, is for everybody in Concord. It's very important. Thank you for giving me 2 minutes.
Let me just add that we haven't talked much about the criteria by which we're going to be evaluating these proposals. If you look at Envision Concord, that's a template for criteria. And health criteria, human health criteria, is one of the embedded criteria that we'll be considering in these options.
Let's check in with Bert. Are there any online questions? Great, go ahead. Why don't we take both?
So question from Alyssa Brown. The slides show dredging in the eastern and southeastern side of the pond only. What would you expect the area in the southwestern and western portion of the pond to be like after dredging?
Those dredging areas are very conceptual. Assuming we would proceed in this proposal, we'd have to get more input on the exactly what areas and whether we'd go more to the mouth of Neshoba Creek. I think the undredged areas would benefit somewhat from increased circulation, but they'd largely be the same depth and subject to the invasives in those particular areas. So the dredging is going to solve the problems in those particular areas that are dredged, not the whole pond. But the whole pond will benefit from increased circulation by virtue of more water.
Plus, we
circulating.
also have in our plans that we will work on, clearing invasives and whatnot, so.
Thanks, Bert. Next one.
Question from Jack Carlton. How was the beneficial effects of dredging calculated to 70 to 100 years, especially given both the increased frequency and volume of major rain events that transport large amounts of silt into the pond?
It's a good question, and the risks uncertainty, there's large uncertainty into the number we're looking at. When does the pond fill up again with sediment? EA has done some initial analysis, and that 100-year number corresponds to what we know about the amount of suspended sediment coming in annually to the pond. That includes rain events, flooding events. That's a yearly number. Could that change over time due to extreme weather events? Yes. Things could be flushed more, or more sediment could be washed in. So there is uncertainty into how the duration of this alternative. But it's decades. It's not several years.
All right, let's take more questions in the room. Go ahead.
Yeah, Dan Stapleton from 20 Conant. Just three very brief questions. First is a follow-up on that question. So some of the early studies that were done for the town indicated that a lot of the sediment comes from just very few sources, mostly in Acton. I didn't know if there was consideration to coordinate with Acton to just kind of address some of those sediment sources. My second question, because there's only 2 or 3 on that whole stretch, upgradient stretch. Second question is, which of the 3 are close in volume to the original bid?
The base plan is
the base plan is the original bid, not the one that EA put in their report. It's the actual original bid.
Right, it's 38,500 cubic yards.
So that's half of what that bid was.
35.8.
So that's about half of what the bid was, half to 60% of what the original bid was then.
I'm sorry?
The original $9 million
Well,
bid.
you mean the cost?
The cost, yeah.
You compare that, the $5 million to $9.2 million, or remember, we have 2 different estimates here.
That's what I'm saying. Was the original volume, was the volume for the original bid, was that A, B, or C? It was A, right? So the costs for A across the 4 contractors are somewhere around 50 to 60% of what the original bid was.
Right, roughly.
Okay. Am I out? Yeah, just the third is a question, but it's a little bit of a comment, but mostly a question on how people should be thinking about these costs. Because the first, and I see you've used like an initial cost and then a 5-year window just to kind of normalize everything. But the first presentation is effectively forever, right? It's going to be, if it works, it's going to be an annual thing or every few years forever. This, my understanding, whether it's a 100-year sediment refill or 50-year sediment refill, it's a one-time amortized over a very long time. So the actual amortization on this dredging would be something more on the order of 50 years. Is that a correct way to think about this?
Roughly, I think so. It's amortized over a long period, yeah.
Costs as well, but you're right.
Got it. Thank you.
Does somebody want to take on the coordination with Acton question that came first?
Well, there's a big watershed out there, and this proposal is focused on Warren's Pond, and it's not focused on the entire watershed. Could there be regional discussions and source controls and nutrient controls? It's far beyond the task force, our remit. But you're right, most of the sediments, suspended sediments is coming from outside the pond. It's coming from upstream. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. So let's give a round of applause to Paul. And we now have Jeff Collins, who's going to share the dam removal group proposal.
All right, thanks, Toby. Let's see, people can see me, I can see everybody. Am I going in the right direction here?
There you go.
Okay, Jeff Collins from 55 Holland Street, closer. Here to speak up for the subgroup that worked on dam removal. So dam removal obviously involves the greatest change to the landscape in the vicinity of Warner's Pond. In the text, we talk often about the Warner's Pond system and thinking about what's there today and what would be there in the event of dam removal. So I'll talk about what that would look like and what considerations we're bringing to that change to retain all the values as much as possible that we look to Warner's Pond for. So in this graphic you see here, and in the graphic that's on our poster, come take a closer look. What's represented, and the next slide has a slightly different representation, is these different natural plant communities that will evolve in the event that Warner's Pond was reduced in extent from its current, current banks down to that dark blue area up at the north, which we alternatively call the deep hole or the open water portion, et cetera. Based on the current bathymetry, that is how deep the current pond bottom is, if the dam were removed, the stream organizes itself into a channel, there would still be about a 4 to 5 acre area of open water based on the fact that there is currently this deeper section of the pond. The other areas would evolve as shallow marsh or deeper marsh or shrub swamp, depending on the relative depth of water. The blue line you see coursing around there is an estimate of where the stream channel would evolve. I'll talk about that and what we would do to make sure that stream channel forms and intersects important areas for recreation, et cetera. So what is the dam removal concept? It is focused on restoring a free-flowing Neshoba Brook by removing the Warner's Pond Dam at Commonwealth Ave and restoring the immediate bank that is around the pond there, or excuse me, that's around the current dam location. Dam removal is it's a well-established engineering science here in Massachusetts. There have been about 70 dams removed in Massachusetts in the last 15 years. The contractors that would bid on this would be people with a lot of experience. They wouldn't just go out there with heavy equipment and start blasting and knocking things down. We have currently a 30% design plan that you can look at on the Warner's Pond Task Force website. This would be refined with additional study, permitting at the state, federal, and local level, and then proceed to a 100% design plan that would then, contractors would bid on and say, okay, here's what it's cost to do what you're asking for. With the dam gone, we would have a restored, free-flowing Neshoba Brook, and the engineer's assessment is that that stream channel, as it flows through the current extent of Warner's Pond, would look like the pond upstream of the current pond. So if you go over the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail overpass near Route 2 and look down at Neshoba Brook there, that you're looking south at a point where Neshoba Brook meets with Fort Pondbrook coming in from the School Street fields and then goes down towards Wright Road in that area and then turns into the pond. So if you were to look at that section of stream, that's your analog for the stream channel that would form within the former footprint of the pond. Some folks have looked at behind Neshoba Brook Bakery, especially in August, and say there's not going to be any water in the pond or in this river. The engineer's assessment is that the best analog is upstream of the pond. So we'll have the brook running through this marsh area with about 30 new acres of marshland vegetation. We'd have about a 4-acre open water area. We would design that channel in the 100% design plan, working with the engineers to say, listen, we want that channel to go to specific points to make sure we're retaining important cultural and recreational uses. That includes the northwest corner of Scout Island, so the Scouts can continue to paddle to Scout Island, the open water area, so the river can be accessed from Giroux Park up through the open water, and importantly, the Commonwealth Ave recreational access point, which is marked boat access at this point. So that would be done in 100% design plan. Where is the channel likely to form in the case of dam removal? And then what engineering and support would be necessary to nudge the channel and hold it in place as that vegetation evolves to meet those goals? We would invest in 5 years. Well, we're doing a 5-year budget, so it could be 5+ years of adaptive management to monitor the evolution, and this is standard practice with dam removal, to monitor against the metrics you're looking to achieve and take corrective action where necessary. We're aware that invasive species are clearly a concern. We saw several, we had a nice slide presentation from the state's Division of Ecological Restoration showing other locations where they've removed dams, and within months, they have a flush of vegetation filling in the site. Phragmites is a major concern out there, the tall grass that can take over these areas, and we would want to be on our toes to prevent that and set aside funds to prevent that. We'd improve public access at a few points, sort of to be determined. I think there's natural energy behind improving access at Giroux Park, Commonwealth Avenue, and maybe another location like the former dam removal or like Pond Street, to be decided with public input. Create a waterfront trail from Giroux Park, that red line you see going around, snaking around what are these agricultural fields, cornfields, south of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, which is the more chartreuse line to the north, and then along the Neshoba Brook on the west side. Importantly, we've talked about creating an at ground level or at grade crossing of Neshoba Brook where the Bruce Freeman currently crosses, so you could again get over to the Wright Road trails and School Street fields. Then you'd be able to walk down the west side. Folks who live on Wright Road currently enjoy that. Hopefully you'd welcome some of us walking back there again, and then you could also walk up to Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. And then recognizing the role of Warner's Pond and historic industry in West Concord would be an important addition to put historic interpretive panels, or maybe it's artwork, or maybe it's an audio tour to recollect that history. What are the benefits? Reduce long-term costs. These ongoing costs that were presented in the first concept, dam maintenance and periodic inspection, the prospect of future dredging, all of that would be set aside. We'd have a one-time investment to create a natural system that is going to care for itself much better than we need to sort of intervene on occasion in the current Warner's Pond system. Improve biodiversity through naturally functioning wetland and stream that is connected to the whole Assabet, to the wild and scenic portion of the Assabet, Concord and Sudbury rivers. Restore natural ecological processes. So we have natural seasonal flooding. We have sediments that are no longer being stuck in Warner's Pond, which is what has filled it up, but running into the Assabet River naturally to create river bottom habitat for our native fish. Restore aquatic habitat connectivity. So not only ocean-going fish that are migrating upstream and will with the removal of Talbot Mills Dam, but our local fish who are currently either stuck in the Assabet system or stuck in the Neshoba, and never the twain shall meet. Not only fish, mussels, other invertebrates that can move up and down a restored and reconnected river. We would improve this through the concept, improve the quality of water entering the Assabet. One idea is, I'll keep it brief. So by no longer having the water sit all day in Neshoba, in Warner's Pond, and the nutrients that have kind of precipitated into the pond, remobilizing into the stream will be moving through the area and no longer pick up these nutrients, phosphorus, nitrogen, that have settled into those sediments. They'll be fixed by vegetation in these restored wetlands. Dissolved oxygen will be higher, temperature will be lower, all of which is important for native wildlife. And of course, the design is intended to retain and enhance recreational uses, although they'll be changed. Paddling will not be a 30-acre expanse of water. It would be a connected pond, a connected river with a smaller pond. Fishing will be different. Not warm water pond species, many of which are non-native in there currently, but reconnected natural and native freshwater fish. Skating would still be possible in the open water area. I grew up skating on a river, and I think the wildlife diversity would be increased, and these trails, which are essential to the proposal, would increase recreational possibilities. On the left of the table, this should be, formatted similar to the other table. We have one-time costs. The middle is annual costs, this $30,000 adaptive management investment. And so the right-hand side is pretty much the same, except that adaptive management multiplies that $30,000 by 5 and adds to the $20,000 one-time plan. So you have a $170,000 budget for that adaptive management. Again, these are estimates. We spoke with engineers. We looked at analogous projects and pulled this together. So the full cost with a lower estimate and higher estimate from 2.6 to 3.35 million dollars. The variance there is how much of that stream channel we would need to engineer, which will be determined in the 100% design plan. Risks and uncertainties include final costs to be determined, how that stream establishes itself within the sediments, although we intend to engineer that. The dependence of these benefits to anadromous fish weighing on the removal of Talbot Mills Dam, which is still in consideration in Billerica. Ongoing conversations with the Department of Corrections to establish those fields, which we've already begun. There are a lot of grants available for dam removal and stream restoration. We haven't really pursued that at all because we'd have to make that decision as a community, but that could reduce our costs. And these are other considerations here. The last bullet there is the question of how are abutting parcels defined? Is it by the water's edge, et cetera? So there's a little bit of legal research required there. We didn't consider just remove the dam and walk away. Yeah. And now I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Jeff. All right. So let's get folks who'd like to ask a question. Can please line up. Same ground rules again as before. Right. So you can see those on your screen. All right. Okay. So I'm seeing a lot of questions. I just want to again name. We can't get to everything. We're going to get to as many of these as we can. So out of respect for everyone who wants to ask a question, please keep it brief. We'll try to be concise in our response, okay? And we'll get as many of these as we can. If we can't get to them all, then we'll make sure you have an opportunity, of course, to write on the comment cards and go online. So please, sir, go ahead.
Phil Brewer again, 132 Wright Road. Again, we're back onto Warner's Pond. Several of the benefits that you've mentioned I really wonder about and suggest they should be studied in a lot more detail. I want to hold some of these back for the rest of the questioners to, I'm sure they're going to get to them. But water doesn't sit in Warner's Pond now, it moves through, which is why we have a dam and the water goes over the dam. So I think that's a completely incorrect conclusion. Water does move through Warner's Pond already. Wright Road residents can already walk to the rail trail. We have our own path through the woods. Anyone who's been on that street, knows that we can get there. If you're talking about improving public access as a benefit, you're improving public access, bringing more people to a resource that is about 10% of what it currently is. That does not make any sense. To have more people come to a more finite resource just is ridiculous. And I think somebody in the beginning mentioned that it's a major assumption that Neshoba Brook, after dam removal, would in fact be free-flowing. I think that should be studied more, because it may not really happen. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gwen Shipley. I live at 89 Wilson Road. My comment is that, we moved to Concord because of its environmental stewardship, and I feel that a dam removal would help to restore a wetland area. And I love that this proposal brings into account the historic uses like Scout Island and fishing and an ability to skate, but that by doing this, it's a one-time solution that would let nature do its work. Thanks.
Hi.
Please go ahead. I just want to remind folks, this is a great opportunity to ask questions that you might want clarified from the group. We also will have you have opportunities to leave comments with your perspective on the cards, but you can say whatever you like. So please go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Linda Olson, 54 Losbrook Road again. So thank you for your presentation. I found it interesting that you had all the guide trails. You're going to refurbish the vegetation and whatnot. I don't see why we can't do that right now as it is, regardless of what happens. Additionally, from where we live, I look out directly on the pond. I see a lot of wildlife. I hear all this talk about fish, 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 fish passage, fish, fish, fish. I sit on that pond. I see directly into a beaver dam. There are multiple beavers on that pond. If we reduce the pond down to a stream, what's going to happen with them? And even if they, even if they are still in the area, what's going to happen if they start damming it again? So there's that. There's the birding wildlife that passes over, and they don't winter, but they refurbish from wherever they're coming and going from. I don't hear any consideration for that. I mean, if we strip it down to a stream and one small pond area, again, to the other gentleman's point, it's it's a reduced land area that doesn't support what the wildlife that is there now is supporting. Okay. So, I mean, has any of this been put into consideration? Because I don't hear any input or verbiage coming back about what's going to happen with the wildlife that's there now. Thank you.
I really appreciate that question. We've all, as a big group, thought a lot about that. And the thinking is with dam removal, you go from the shallow pond, which is facing a lot of issues and is frankly, we see wildlife out there, but a human-created system that is eutrophic and it's not offering the wildlife habitat benefit that that area could be offering. We feel that, well, the proposal, the concept is arguing that a free-flowing stream with restored wetland habitat, 30 acres of emergent marsh, will provide more diverse habitat for more species of plants and animals than the current pond does.
Hi. Thanks, everybody. I'm Mark Boasberg from 48 Losbrook. I've lived on the pond for over 40 years. And my question is, it's not really a question, it's so much a comment that I believe that the engineering study is faulty. You claim that there's going to be a 4-acre pond when all this is done. However, if you remove the dam, the water level is going to drop about, what, 5-6 feet?
5.
So the deep hole, which is 12 feet at its deepest, will no longer be a deep hole and will probably start filling in rather rapidly. So we're going to have to dredge that periodically, in the way I see it. Has this been looked into?
I think a lot of those questions would be addressed in a 100% design plan. We'd have more details on that.
Okay, so we don't know
It's a good
now.
question, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Is that, do we know, do you want to check in? Do we know if that's been looked at
Any other thoughts on that?
from others? Yeah.
It's true that there has been some discussion that there could be sediment deposition in that, but there's also the fact that the water flow will be faster through that, and so it may actually scour. And so those are questions, well, you can, yeah. I mean, talking to the engineers we have advising us, that's one of the things that needs to be resolved.
I'd be happy to advise you too. Civil engineering, MIT, mine 50 years ago, but you know. No.
All right.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you. Yeah, appreciate the question. Good luck. Yeah. Go ahead, sir, please.
Hi, Gary Kleiman, Central Street in West Concord, and also on the NRC, but speaking for myself. Just a quick comment and a question. The comment is I really appreciate Mary Weinberg's paper just pointing out that rivers and streams also count as blue space. So, you know, it is definitely a goal to increase blue space and green space for West Concord. The question, though, is the $3 million. You mentioned that a significant portion of those costs might be offset by state and federal grants. We don't know yet. Can I ask, historically, when other towns have sought funding from state and federal resources for dam removal, are like 90% of the costs covered, 50% of the costs covered, 10%? Do we have any idea?
Malcolm, you did some work on this, right?
Yeah, I think Acton had, with the removal of the River Street Dam, they had 80% funding from a combination of state and federal for that. We know that this dam will not be a high priority for dam removal because it's not dangerous, it's not about to take lives, but there is a lot of funding available for the restoration of riverine environments and various habitats. So we would expect, and nobody hold me to this, that we could get as much as 50% financing from what we know of. Of course, the federal government may shut down next week.
Hi, everybody. I'm Henry Maurer. I live at 92 Losbrook. And no offense to anybody here, but I think I'm quite a bit younger than the demographics here. So I'd like to ask a question kind of on behalf of the younger generations in Concord. And you mentioned a lot in your presentation about the paddling opportunities that will still be available in this stream and in this tiny pond that was once the deep hole. But my concern comes with less experienced paddlers who are still trying to, their first experience kayaking, canoeing, whether it's through scouts or on their own, and kind of this danger that it's kind of a faster moving water area now, and compared to Warner's currently, which is relatively slow unless you're right next to the dam. And so my question is, how are you guys going to address the concerns of recreational opportunities for specifically the younger generations?
It's a great question. Thanks for coming out. I think, well, there's a current proposal from the Recreation Commission to explore putting in a dock at Giroux Park. This doesn't completely answer your question, but that would have access to the ponded area, which is, again, the slower moving area of this restored vision. But beyond that, you've got me stumped. It's a great question and something to look into.
Okay.
Any thoughts from other members of our group? No, it's an important consideration. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Hi, Donna Tisdale, 335 Calm Ave. I have a question about you want to take the dam out so you can have like fresh water going through all the time and get different species, whatever. But wouldn't dredging or even just the regular maintenance get the pond to that point that it would be deep enough that the rivers they're not rivers, brooks, thank you, lost that for a second, that the brooks would still do the same thing. So I take down a dam when, I know dredging is expensive, but even if you did a little bit, maybe by where the brook is, bring it in, eventually over time, if you clean up the pond some, you would get that same effect. In other words, instead of doing the whole thing, letting it all go, you'd still get the same effect if the pond were cleaned up in the first place and gave it a little more room for the brooks to come in and bring all of that other animal life that you're talking about.
Yeah, the data I'll share with you was data we had presented from ORS, the watershed organization, and Pam Rockwell spoke earlier, one volunteer who goes out and collects that data, that the nutrient levels coming out of the pond are higher than the water going into the pond. So again, there was a comment of water moves through the pond. Well, it does, it processes in about a day is the residence time, but in that time, the water quality is reduced by the nutrients the amount of nutrients in the water and the water temperature. Importantly, the water sitting under the sun for a day, on average, increases over 2 degrees, or almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit, 1 degree Celsius. And temperature is a really important water quality characteristic for a lot of wildlife. So I'm not sure, others speak up here, if you see a mechanism for, by increasing the depth of the pond, any of these water quality parameters would be ameliorated. Paul?
I just think it's a great question because you've defined sort of the nature of the deliberations the task force has to get into, the trade-offs. Can you accomplish the same thing with another alternative, and what are the cost trade-offs? So we haven't made decisions on that, but the number of ways of accomplishing the same thing, but there are trade-offs in doing it. So you've defined sort of our scope of work from here in the next 3 meetings.
Yeah. I appreciate your work, and I'd like to leave you with one note. We have a fire pit on the ice during the winter, and a grandmother and her 2 grandsons came, 5th grade and 6th grade. Little boy was skating around 5th grade. He came and he sat down. He said, I'm going to go home and write about this. And I've been a teacher for 20 years in 5th grade, and I thought, a young man wants to go home and on his own fruition wants to go write about something. And then he wasn't sure what it was. So he had a handful of marshmallows, went off skating again, came back and went, I've got it. It's the freedom that I feel out here. That whole big pond, basically to himself. He was just overwhelmed. So I turned to my husband. I said, wow, George, a young man from Concord, after out being on a pond, wants to go home and write about it. What a novel thing. I'll just leave you with that.
All right. I want to make sure we get to 2 young gentlemen up here, but I also want to check in with Bert. Do we have a question or 2 online?
First question comes from Grady Flynn. Question on behalf of Troop 132 Concord. Will Scout Island continue to exist with these options?
Yes. Important question, great question. Scout Island would be surrounded by some of the marshy vegetation. The northwest corner, as sort of projected by EA and by intention through engineering, the stream channel would come close to the northwest corner where there's a takeout. David, correct me if I'm wrong. And so folks would still be able to paddle to Scout Island. Scout Island would still be isolated. From Pond Street to Scout Island, that may be more marsh than open water. So if one wanted to bash your way over there, maybe that would be more possible, but it would still be, it wouldn't be connected by land bridge based on the sort of the map estimates that we have. David?
I just want to add another comment.
David, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. I'm David Owen. I'm on the board of the Concord Scout House. Hi, Grady. So I just actually looked up regulations. So there would be a change for Webelos. With an open pond, Webelos, that's the highest rank of Cub Scouts, are permitted to paddle a canoe. The lower ranks of Cub Scouts are not. But if it changes to a stream like this, which is considered moving water, the Webelos would not be able to paddle. So that would be a change. But Grady, it wouldn't change it for the Boy Scout level.
Thank you. I just want to make a quick sort of process announcement, which is, given the alarm that just went off, that means we are entering the final agenda item before we move to our open house. We're going to spend about 10 minutes. And just to say, this is general Q&A. So I know there's a line of people already up who are asking about dam removal. Great. If anyone else wants to come up and has a question that is not about any of the specific proposals, or if any of you wants to broaden your question to address some of the other issues, you are welcome. This is an open Q&A at this point for the last portion of this meeting before the open house. So with that, I'm going to go to you. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Oscar Nystrom. This is my brother, Charlie Nystrom, and we live at 316 Commonwealth Avenue. Oh, sorry. I'm Oscar Nystrom. This is my brother, Charlie Nystrom. We live at 316 Commonwealth Avenue, and ever since we were young, our grandparents have taken us to the direct spot on the dam to teach us how to fish and really experience the beauty of nature. But as I was growing up, I've realized that it's not only about learning a new hobby, it's about socializing and making new connections with people and just really experiencing life outside of screens that are so much like in depth of life these days. And so my question is, with the removal of the dam, if that happens, how would it impact the ability to socialize and really make connections with future generations and the youth right now?
That's awesome. I want others to speak up here too, but I think we try to be very intentional with all generations in mind about ability to still connect and be adjacent to and experience this wetland and stream area through those 3 improved or new recreational access points. So Commonwealth Avenue, I think each of the proposals sort of has an element or has essentially the same element of improving the parking lot, improving, having like a dock or a all persons accessible dock either at Giroux or at Commonwealth Ave, so more people can get onto the water. More people could sit on a dock. More people can fish or continue to fish at Pond Street or at the current, the vicinity of the current dam. Walking along what was proposed as a new trail on the west side and continuing to walk along that whole stream, which should be envisioned as a future of more stream, waterfront trails, including MCI, et cetera. I think, all of what you experience, hopefully people can still experience, or I would envision would still experience while looking out at a running river, at wetland with red-winged blackbirds, Virginia rails calling, in everything else that you'd experience. It would be a different place, but that connection to nature, I think, and the intention of the proposal is that that is essential and sort of central to the whole experience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's, yeah, thank you. Let's check in online, Bert. Any more online in the chat?
Yep. So next question is from Anna Feldwig. The first part of her question was addressed earlier, so I'm going to skip over that. The remaining pond is so far west that it wouldn't really be visible from the open area of Giroux. Would we be able to clear more area at Giroux so that people could look out over the residual pond or have a pier into the water? Finally, Neshoba Brook did not freeze over all this winter, even though the pond was frozen for nearly 2 months, so skating on the brook is not likely.
I think it's a great note to make in terms of the design intention. I'm not a designer, but I think that's words that designers use. that would be a goal. And Paul, I think, is in the lead in our group in terms of Recreation Commission's thinking about, and it's pursuing CPA funds for design right now of where it would be possible to design a dock or a wildlife viewing platform. So I think with a sketch that I saw was a little bit closer to that open water area, regardless of the future. Is that right, Paul?
I can't speak for the Recreation Department. The Recreation Department, I think, has just gotten possession from the town of the park, and if they haven't, it'll be soon. I think the future of Giroux Park is to be determined. Phase 1 is done. There's some proposals for improvement. I think there's a long way to go on the pond, take into account viewing areas. I know there's been concern about trees and viewing areas. I think that it's a whole separate issue. It's in progress that over the next few years, I think we'll be planning around that.
Mark?
Yeah, I'll just make the comment that one of the things that we observed when we were talking about how to manage this resource is that there are a lot of seams here. Because we have the recreation area at Giroux, because Public Works is largely responsible for dam maintenance and mowing and things like that, and then there's the conservation restrictions and the purview of the NRC. We recognized when we were starting to talk about why is this not been better brought into focus, we saw the need to bring those groups together with people from the community who are also interested in that and try and bring some focus on that. And that really is kind of the crux of how we came up with the idea about reinvigorating a management plan and making sure that the stakeholders, many of whom are represented on this task force, have those conversations, because we found that the conversations were deepening as we talked about it ourselves, and we wanted to build on that into the future so that we could accomplish some of the things that have been, let's call it, frustrations over time with how the pond has been evolving.
Could I just want to, because I don't think we've answered Anna's question. I think it's absolutely right that Neshoba Brook is a fast-flowing brook. It is unlikely to freeze such as one can skate on it. It used to, but the weather is so much milder now. I do think from what we have learned that the surface water on the deep pond will freeze if we get a winter like this winter. So there will be skating, but it will be reduced, no question.
I'm just looking for a clarification of what part of the agenda we're in right now.
So we are in the general Q&A right now. Okay, we're going to have just a couple more minutes. You can ask a question on dam removal if you want, but you can also ask a question about any of the topics you would like. We're going to move into an open house in just a couple minutes. Okay?
Thank you. I just have a comment. My name is Diane Perlman. I live at 237 Commonwealth Ave. I bought my house in 2022 in part because the realtor said there were plans to dredge Warner's Pond, including an area for swimming. Even if I never choose to swim in the pond, I am so grateful to live at its edge. I love kayaking and canoeing in the spring and fall, paddleboarding in the summer months, and this past winter was best of all. The frozen pond was truly magical. I met so many Concord residents and folks from abutting towns out on the pond skating and fishing. I feel deeply connected to so many people. I've only lived here for 3 years. It's really hard for me to wrap my mind around why such a tiny dam and ending the life of such a glorious pond has become the source of so much attention. It is my understanding that Concord residents and taxpayers have already invested in rebuilding the dam 15 years ago and purchasing the land that became Giroux Park with the plan to make Warner's Pond and Giroux Park into an amazing natural recreation resource in the middle of West Concord. Now with the commuter communities legislation that will likely lead to more housing near the center of West Concord, and with the MCI land opening up and all the development that will happen there, West Concord will see a huge increase in population density over the next decade or so. In addition, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail brings in people from surrounding communities who will discover all that West Concord has to offer. This is the time to preserve our blue and green spaces, and especially this beautiful pond for all the people who will want to enjoy it in years to come. We are on the cusp of reaping the benefits of our investment, and it would be an absolute disgrace to lose the pond now. I would be in favor of either proposal 1 or 2, but I don't want to lose this pond. I want other people to discover it, and I want to see it developed into the amazing resource it promises to be. Thank you.
I just want to check in with my task force members. We have a number of other questions. I want to suggest we're unlikely to be able to get to all of you who are in line. Again, we have these other methods. Are we comfortable keeping going for another 10 minutes or so, right up just a little bit past the hour to give more people a chance? I'm also going to suggest that those of you asking questions now, we're going to ask you, if you can, to keep it just to 1 minute to get as many of you as you can, and we'll also try to be concise in our responses. I'm sorry for you to have to be the first one with that, but
Pam Rockwell, Main Street. I support dam removal both because of the improvements in the environment, the free-flowing water, and the liability issues that the town would have owning a dam. But I want to point out there's one group of people along Losbrook and who back up to the dam who are going to lose these important recreational activities that they have from their backyard. And I would really, as somebody who has to drive or walk a long distance to get to Warner's Pond to enjoy it, I would really love to see a comparison in one of your reports or here about what activities that people are getting in their backyards now in some areas along the Losbrook side, along the Commonwealth Avenue side with the boat ramp, which is going to have a different backup to a future free-flowing brook, and at Giroux, which is we're not all sure about yet because it's new and it's a new place to get to go have the experiences of seeing the water, writing about the ice skating, doing those things that I don't get to do in my backyard, but I would be able to do from Giroux and from the Commonwealth Boat Ramp. So I'd love to see that in your report or in an op-ed in the Bridge to compare those different places and the recreational experiences and the aesthetic environmental experience that you get from being at those 3 locations, because it seems like we're not going to lose them all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Cynthia Katz, 20 Conant Street. I live in West Concord, but I'm not in a butter. I think it's unfortunate that we're only having one meeting after all the work that all the task force did. There's a lot to digest, and I think that all the people here kind of are putting that out. I think my question is, what is the town's commitment, money-wise and allocation-wise, to dredging to get at the kind of stream flow that you're really talking about with the dam removal? I don't think it's going to happen naturally. And then my other question is, why did we spend money that we approved for dredging on a 30% design for dam removal? It seems like the hand's already being tipped to that. And personally, I think that stinks as someone who voted for it.
Say this. I do want to say this. This part I have to respond to. Every meeting we've had is a public meeting. You can sign up, you can come to any meeting we have, even every subgroup has been available. We've gone out of our way to make sure that people, in fact you too, have been at these meetings. So every meeting we've had, and there's been many, many of them, have been available to the public. So I'll be very clear about that. Thank you. No, this is the final one, but it's not the only one. Don't make it sound it's the only one, because it's not. Thank you.
Connie Levine, 149 Stowe Street. I think Warner's Pond has been badly neglected for the last 20 years. They've never made it past the first statement in their mission statement to protect, preserve, and enhance Warner's Pond and its adjacent wetlands and habitat through the responsible management. They've never lowered it to treat the invasives. They've never attached the fish ladder. So I think the logically thing is, the first thing is to try that since you've never done it before, see what kind of results you have. And then if that doesn't work too well, move on to the dredging. And in no way should this thing be destroyed. It's a 54-acre pond, and another one is not coming anytime soon. It abuts homes, it abuts Giroux Park, and it's a beautiful pond. It's just been neglected by this town. And I agree about the money. I looked at that 30% thing and I said, why in the world did they pay this in 2023? No one had voted to remove the pond. So I think that's some kind of a serious violation with our town's money.
So I can respond to that question.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead.
I can respond to that question, Toby. So the
wants to
money
respond?
for the dam removal design, the 30% design, was not used from dredging allocated funds. It was used from funds that were allocated for restoration purposes.
Nancy Sokol, 24 Sunnyside Lane in West Concord. I have 2 fairly simple observations. One is irreversibility. When we take the dam down, there's no going back. The other 2 options don't preclude doing something else in the future if that doesn't work out. And 2 is, I live in Concord because it's beautiful here. And part of the beauty is this pond. We have a lot of wetlands. I don't find wetlands all that beautiful. Take the Losbrook between Sunnyside Lane and Wright Road. There's wetlands on the right side. It's hostile looking. You know, I don't want to go in there. You know, you get mud up to your shins. We don't need more wetland. We don't have a lot of ponds for recreation. We need to keep Warner's Pond.
Hi, Anna O'Sullivan, 42 Lawsbrook Road. I was a little bit concerned about the response that was given to my neighbor when she asked about the animals living around the pond. I've lived on the pond my entire life. You know, you see the same animals living there year after year. There's one blue heron that anyone who lives on the pond can tell you. We see it every single day. So when the response was given that, you know, yeah, we're destroying one habitat, but it'll just be replaced with a new one that's more biodiverse, I think it's a bit more of a trolley problem than you're giving it credit for. You know, like there's a real ethical dilemma here. You're killing, you know, entire species possibly. You're relocating entire species. It's not as simple as like, you know, we get to pick which ones we want. You know, like it's not that simple. You're actively making the choice to, you know, destroy an ecosystem. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Malcolm, you want to respond to that? Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to respond to that because there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding over this. We have actually done a very careful inventory of what the current wildlife is, what the expected changes would be with different scenarios. We wouldn't be simply extirpating wildlife. We wouldn't all be dropping dead. We would see a shift, certainly. We would see different patterns. It's actually something that we need to discuss at our next meeting in this area, but nobody is ignoring the issue of the amount of wildlife. The volume of wildlife would be a great deal more with swamps and with marshes. It's just a more diversified area, but it would be different, there's no question.
Jill O'Sullivan, 42 Lawsbrook. This wasn't my question, but I wanted to follow up on your follow-up to hers. I'm a little confused. You said nobody's ignoring it, but what does that actually mean? What happens to these habitats?
We will see.
The wildlife that depends on
You will see some animals migrate out. You will see other animals migrate in.
So no populations do lose their habitat that they depend on and die as a result?
The intention is not that.
Well, of course.
I just want to chime in. I don't.
You know, it's not very helpful to get into a debate in this circumstance.
Okay, but that wasn't actually what I got up here to say. I live on the pond, and in the summer, the difference in temperature between the roadside and the pond side is vast. And in a world that is rapidly warming, I think it's pretty surprising that we're considering pretty much decimating a very valuable blue resource. As somebody else said a couple of comments ago, once it's done, it's done. It's not coming back. And we really have to think pretty hard about that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, Brian Windmiller, 65 Arrowhead Road. I don't begin to have, I'm a wildlife biologist, and I've dedicated my career to the conservation of rare species and getting to know them mostly around here in this area. And through the field conservation department that I started at Zoo New England, I've been working with a rare species of turtle, the wood turtle, that is just barely clinging on to existence in sections of Neshoba Brook and Fort Pond Brook that are just upstream of Warner's Pond. There's a lot of ecological misinformation that I hear here. There are good questions. I don't begin to have enough time to address them. But I will say simply, I have absolutely no doubt that removing this dam and allowing Neshoba Brook to regain its free flow will be a vast improvement to the diversity and abundance of the wildlife that is at most critical risk here. If you take, for a moment, if you think about the perspective of wildlife, I understand, I live in northeastern Concord. I don't live right by this. I understand about areas being changed and looking different than what you're used to. I understand why it would be upsetting for residents who live near Warner's Pond to see the pond greatly reduced in size. I understand that, but switch your perspective and think about the animals that live in these kinds of systems. Warner's Pond is not a natural thing. Warner's Pond was created out of a stream that used to flow there. It was created for very narrow economic purposes that are no longer valid today. When it was created, it created great disruption for the animals that lived in that system, in the Neshoba Brook, Fort Pond Brook system. And if you step back for a second and you think about all of the species, like the wood turtles that live barely clinging on to existence in Neshoba Brook and Fort Pond Brook, just upstream of the dam, if you think of all the rare fish, brook trout, bridal shiners that live in these systems, over centuries now.
Okay. Yeah.
So just in summation, we have tons and tons of dam-created ponds all throughout Concord. We have lots of habitat for bluegills and yellow perch.
Sir,
we have very little habitat
we
for
appreciate
riverine
it.
species.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
That's great. He went over, and I get to go after a biologist. I'm thrilled about that, but I disagree with him. And my name is Greg Terrio. I live on Wright Road, so I'm in a butter. It's a terrible name, adjacent to the pond. And I'm here for one reason. I want to give a couple quotes. And I know it's late. I know it's 9 p.m. But first, a famous one. Many men go fishing all their lives without knowing that it is not fish they are after. Henry David Thoreau. Now, my son and I fish the pond. I live on the pond. Moved here about 9 years ago with my son Tyler. And it's been so special for me and my son because I get to see him grow. I mean, he's everything to me. And I wrote a blog about the damage that would happen when we look at the bald eagles and all the fish and everything. And it got picked up by the bridge, and I'm grateful. And that was June 2023. And I left it with, it'll leave the beavers high and dry, but what about the fish? I'm an angler. I'm here for the fish, right? I have a degree in geoscience. And I went after a biologist. I've caught every fish in that pond, I think. My friend Scott today caught fall fish. I've caught pike, largemouth, everything. A fall fish is a beautiful and a large minnow, right? If we destroy the dam, you talk about a beautiful stream, perhaps it'll dry up. I'm going to close with one thing here. Let's protect this valuable resource for all generations, like my son Tyler, who's now 9, and I literally got him hooked on fishing from buying bait at the Five and Dime before it went out of business, or went out. It upsets me to this day. All right, in closing, from someone else that was on the pond, very important, and it's a question for everybody, and it's one that I don't think we can answer. A lake is the landscape's most beautiful and expressive feature. It is Earth's eye, looking into which the beholder measures the depth of his own nature. Henry Thoreau. We are all beholders, and the question is, what would Thoreau do? So it's an open question.
Thank you very much. So, folks, I want to just suggest, these have been wonderful comments. We've appreciated your participation. We have another piece of this agenda that we want to make sure we can do to get all of the comments of folks in the room, regardless of whether you're going to get a chance to speak at the microphone or if you're comfortable speaking at the microphone. So I want to apologize to those of you who are up there waiting, especially you, ma'am, who are right at the microphone now.
Just 1 minute each of
Yep.
us, for Christ's sake. What do you want, to go home and watch Fox
Okay.
News?
Very
So
briefly.
let's give you guys, I'll give you guys 30 seconds, okay, if you may. Yeah, okay, one minute? Okay, we'll do 1
Briefly,
minute. Go
thank
ahead.
you to the entire task force. You have spent many hours, and I am a member of the public, and I have felt welcome at every meeting. I need to refute the gentleman who said Warner Pond is not a real thing. it is very much a real thing to many, many people who are living in Concord, to many people who are here right now. Is that my 30 seconds?
Thank you. Wonderfully done. Appreciate it. Yes.
Hi, Peter Alden again. I'm involved in invasive alien plants in many ways. It is my vision that many other ponds and marshes that I've seen around here that used to be cattails have become purple loosestrife first, and then Phragmites comes in and takes over. It is my vision that within 5 years, no matter what you guys do, if you drain this pond, you're going to have a sea of 100,000 Phragmites. You're going to have Japanese knotweed, which is also this side of the bike trail right along the edge of Neshoba Brook. Japanese knotweed will also grow to 10 feet, the same as the Phragmites, and you won't be able to see the stream. The little pond, the deep hole, some of the water birds we get there, and I run the sort of the Christmas bird count in some ways and started it. Things like the mute swan, the common mergansers, the hooded mergansers that eat the fish that still survive there, they need a long runway to take off. On that small pond, you will not have any of those there because they can't jump up like a mallard. So I'm all in favor of this, and so I'm saying save the pond, save the dam, save the 3 islands, save the skating, save the views, save the wildlife, and save $5 million.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Catherine Nystrom, proud mother of Oscar and Charlie, and I'm at 316 Commonwealth Avenue. I have a comment and a question. I'll get it in 30 seconds. One, I know one of the goals here is to connect underserved people with the community. I just want to say that my dad, a Vietnam vet who struggled mightily during COVID, was brought out of that, and my children who struggled mightily during COVID were brought out of that by connecting together, fishing in the pond. Just putting that out there. And people who don't have the means to join a country club or a swim club will have something to do enjoying the space. Number 2, and this is actually this is a question that keeps me up at night. If the pond becomes a swamp, what can we expect it to smell like?
Okay.
I'd really like to know.
Is this something that we have the expertise here to answer? I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
Thank you.
An important
Yeah.
question for me.
But question noted. Thank you. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Benefits. We had the benefit of people
Sorry,
who are no
we
longer
know you've spoken, but just introduce yourself for the record. Yeah.
benefits. We had the benefit of people who have died, who in 2004 put together the Warners Pond Stewardship Committee, working in conjunction with the Town of Concord, Natural Resources, and the Division of Natural Resources. Delia has very nicely digitalized this brochure. We must not forget them. Joanne Lloyd, Dot Higgins, Ruth Giroux, and Menes had the vision of what they know to be a community asset, what they knew to be a community asset. When I moved here in '79, these people are alive. They told me the stories, 150 years of a community. So let us not forget what they did. Let us continue, to see what their vision was. And also, I thank Delia, she didn't want me to thank her, for putting this online. And the other thing is that quickly, when we bought Giroux Park, there was a survey that went out. 3,602 people responded. I'm not going to go into this because you can find it online, but it was all the people. Okay, I know my time is up. It was.
We had nothing to do with that.
Okay, get the cane, but 70% of all the respondents were for the benefit of the water. And no. Okay, but can I quickly say what Delia did? Go to Concord Government, go to Natural Resources, go to Warners Pond, and go to brochures. And you can read this whole brochure that the people before us, we must not forget them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yep. All right. I believe this is our last commenter.
You're not going to do that to me, are you, Bill? Okay, Miguel Echevarri, 255 Commonwealth Ave. Just 2 quick questions. Jeff, you had mentioned about the trail networks, and you had talked about the Red Line Trail around the farm field, and then the bridge over Neshoba. They're both great ideas. The only thing is they're not really mutually exclusive to the dam removal. They could be done for recurring management and also for the dredging projects, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I did want to draw that distinction. Okay, that was, now I also have another one, but I don't think you guys can answer it, but, so if there's a stream outside my house now, in the back of my house, all right, and my house is over 100 years old, and I can see like, we're quite a ways from the water, but I can see water damage in the basement. And I remember growing up that, you know, Commonwealth Ave would get flooded. Well, the dam right now is preventing the flooding of that area. What happens when there's no dam? There is a stream there, though. Trees start growing up, and let's say a deep beaver builds a dam, you know, right by my house. Now, if you look at Madison Drive, I'm sure you've dealt with that, Mark, you know, with, you know, the homeowners there, and I think Cambridge Ave, too. We don't really have much recourse when beavers move into our areas and damage our properties. So what if you do remove the dam and there's a stream there and then the beavers build a dam and it floods my house, what recourse do I have?
I'll let Delia answer the law on and regulations on dealing with beavers, but just briefly, there has been an initial analysis of changing in flooding conditions if the dam were to come out, and there would be slightly lower flood elevations in the, you know, our more frequent seasonal floods, 2 and 5 year frequency floods. The less frequent floods, like the 50, 100 year or 200 year frequency floods, there'd basically be no difference in sort of the flood conditions at
But
the
if a
site.
beaver-
It's not answering the beaver question.
Okay,
but
thanks.
I think Delia could answer that if there's nuisance conditions, the town can address that.
Right, so we do get a lot of those concerns from residents about beavers and if they are impacting public health or safety. So if your basement is flooding, if your septic is flooding, if your driveway is flooding, then there are measures that can be taken. We work with some people to see if there's a possibility of putting in beaver deceivers. We have a number of those across town. There are options that we can take if there's a threat to public
if we
health
do
or
remove
safety.
the dam, that's one of the things I have to look forward to is taking those precautions in order to protect my property. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so could we please make this super brief?
Process question? Very
Yes,
quick process
please go ahead. Quick
I
question.
may have missed this earlier, so I apologize. But given the cost of all three proposals, is your recommendation going to town meeting for a vote? How does that work?
Go ahead, Delia.
Unless you have Doge authority, which I'm not aware of.
So I'll just briefly remind that this task force is a subcommittee of the Natural Resources Commission. So when we render a recommendation, it will go back to Natural Resources Commission, which would then decide whether they want to agree with that, and if there was a funding need, then they could propose something. We will not see anything, obviously not this year's town meeting, because the warrant's already published and the recommendation isn't even done yet. So the earliest case could be a town meeting of 26 if the Natural Resources Commission sees that. And then, of course, we had the question earlier about the Community Preservation Act funding, what it's been previously approved to do, and whether or not that would fit in any way, shape, or form with whatever the recommendation was. So this task force is meeting 3 more times to try to come to that recommendation, which goes back to the NRC, and then the NRC will decide how to move it forward from there.
Thanks, Mark. They'll be posted. Yeah.
I think it's likely.
Likely the next one will be next week. Yeah. Yeah.
I just had a quick question. Jeff Edgers, 50 Highland Street. I really appreciate hearing all of this and seeing all these options. And obviously, there's some options that are more popular here tonight, and some that are less. And I'd love to hear from somebody in the group. You've had many meetings. You all come from different places and situations. How do you make a decision based on what is the right thing to do and what feels right?
Yeah.
I think we all battle with that in our neighborhoods when we look around what we want, and I feel terrible for everybody who lives on Warner Pond and is dealing with this, but I don't know what the answer is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thanks for that. I can speak to that since we'll be speaking with our leadership team and working, moving forward with the task force on some next steps related to coming to agreement. So first of all, right, we have developed these criteria for exactly the reason of we are trying to look at all of these proposals on a similar footing, right, and think of ourselves as fostering the interests of the town, even though these are all individuals with their own perspectives. We are going to evaluate these three criteria, these three alternatives, using these criteria. The task force members are all going to come to their own different conclusions on that. We're going to share that with each other, and we're going to discuss it. And there are going to be differences in how different people see these different alternatives. And we're going to explore where are those differences coming from. Where are we aligned? Where are we different? Right? Can we get more aligned? And even if we can't, what is a possible pathway that could build consensus? That is not likely to be any one of these. We're going to come forward with proposals that looking at where all the different perspectives are, where we're aligned, where we're not, what that pathway might look like. And it could be the case that we all arrive at something and we're all on board and we have a single report that is full consensus, or it might be not the case in which there are some different perspectives. And we're going to share the extent to which we agree and on what we agree, and we're going to share the extent to which we don't and on what we don't agree. And that's going to be the report that we share with the NRC. Our goal is to get agreement as broadly as we can. Our goal is to agree on a pathway that we can all live with, and we'll see how far we can get in getting alignment on that. Yeah. Okay, so I want to thank all of you for coming and for your great questions. I want to thank our task force members for, first of all the work that you put into making tonight happen and the really wonderful job you've been doing answering the public's questions. And I can just tell from your applause, the recognition. I have been a facilitator for 15 years. I have never been part of an all-volunteer public body that has put in as much work as these people, and I say that completely seriously. It is remarkable. So thank you. Yes, they deserve it. So we have one final ask of you before you go. We have around the room different posters, okay, and different flip charts. And you'll see over there, we have a recurring management poster which summarizes the information from the presentation and some flip charts. And underneath those flip charts on a chair, you'll find some pens, some markers, and some stickies. Okay, these are little tear-out sticky papers. We would invite you to please submit additional comments through these sticky notes. We will also have task force members for a few minutes at least. I know some of them need to go. But around those different areas which represent the proposal that they themselves are working on. So you can ask them clarifying questions if you didn't have a chance to ask it here in front of the group or you were too shy. You can submit your comments, and we really value these. These are equally as important as anything that was said in the room, right? We take these seriously, we will review them. So over there, against that wall, is recurring management, and you can see there are 3 flip charts. One of them asks, what do you like about this proposal? Even if you don't like it overall, feel free to say something, some piece of it you like. What do you have concerns about when you see this? And then finally, what would you like to see further clarified? Are there things that you heard tonight? Actually, I have a lot more questions. I want to know more. Put them on a sticky. We'll review all of them and discuss them at our next meeting. So recurring management is over against that wall. We have dredging against the curved wall over there, okay, and their own poster. And then we have dam removal against this wall here with this poster. So I'm going to officially, well, maybe I should turn over to my co-chairs to officially close the meeting, but we will be stationed around and here to answer questions for at least a few minutes, and we invite you please submit additional comments. All right. You can also, yes, you can go put comments online to the Warners Pond Task Force website if you prefer. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it. All right.